My name is Lisa Feldman. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Surgery, Division of Neurosurgery at City of Hope. My research interests focus on developing new methods to treat glioblastoma. I'm particularly interested in altering the glioblastoma tumor microenvironment to reduce hypoxia in the aims of improving CAR T therapy.
My name is Mina Cedric, and I'm a medical oncologist and assistant professor at City of Hope in the Department of Medical Oncology and Therapeutics Research. I am a medical oncologist who specializes in the care of older adults with breast cancer, and my research is the interface of cancer and aging.
Hi, my name is Vicki Seewaldt. I'm professor and chair of the Department of Population Science, and I study early events in breast cancer. I'm also an MD and see patients, and I had the sad task of trying to get myself funded back in 2000, and I was very lucky. I did get funded, and I've been continuously funded by NCI since then. And so the purpose of this is to go and talk about how to get started. So how to get started with a grant, I think, is one of the most difficult things that you can do when you first start writing a grant. So for me, I've written loads of R1s. So I go, oh yeah, what's the cool idea that I have today? Let's go write about it, and we'll figure out how to get the preliminary data. But if you're a new investigator and you're starting off, this is a really big task because you only have so much preliminary data, you have only so much resources, and importantly, you have only so much time. So, Minna, what are the grants that you have gotten or maybe have gotten or are close to getting?
So I have been fortunate. I started off with K-12 here at City of Hope, and I also had an R03 through the NIA. Most recently, I have a good score, waiting to hear back from positive for a K-76 from the NIA. Most of my research is being funded from the National Institute on Aging, where I am bringing my perspective as an oncologist to study the care of older adults.
And so the K award that you got is a special thing. It's a Beeson Award, and it's for people who are just about ready to get their R01. So it's that very last little bit. Thanks to the NIA, they have a special award, which would be nice if we had it for NCI. But anyway, okay, Lisa, how about you?
Well, I share in Mina's very good fortune. I received a K-12 within the first 3 weeks of starting as a professor here at City of Hope. And now I'm applying for a K-08. I also have been fortunate to receive some funding from foundations like the Margaret Early Foundation. But my next goal is really a K-08. And then after that, maybe an R01, R21.
Yep. R1 sounds good to me. So the first thing that you want to do when you're starting to think about writing a grant is you need to get your NIH biosketch together and go have a conversation with somebody who has written a lot of grants, or if that person is not accessible, go find the K award person at NCI who fits your particular area of study. It could be NCI, which would be cancer. It could be NIA, which is aging, like Minna does. There's all kinds of different subdivisions. So you just go on the NIH website, you go under the K kiosk, and you start looking for people who are involved in grants that you might be interested in. So you want to have, when you go talk to your NIH program person, you want to have your NIH biosketch. So, and put it together, making it look really nice, and see if you can find some people to help you and look at it. And then you also want to have a conversation of, okay, do you think I'm ready for a K? Or do you think I'm way past a K and should be applying for an R? And this is someplace that NIH can really help. So Minna, you've had a number of conversations with NIH. How did they go?
I think they are very helpful. The program officer that I've been working with has really been my advocate, really trying to understand what is it that I want to accomplish, helping me think about what are my long-term goals and what are the training steps that I need to take to get to those goals. So I have founded a really good relationship where I've been able to sort of develop growth with the program officer and be able to guide me and my mentors on some of the next steps. That was very critical. The things that they have told me has played an instrumental part in how I have, drifted and moved the pathway in my career.
So, Lisa, have you had any conversations with NIH yet?
I have, and I had a very different experience. In fact, last month, I reached out to a program officer for my KOA, and she had said, yes, please do send me your biosketch as well as your specific aims, but I'm not going to give you any specific feedback other than, are you an appropriate candidate? And so that's what she sent me back. You are an appropriate candidate. Period. Okay.
So that relationship with NCI or with NIA, but with your NIH program person is really, really important. They have to be very clear about the parameters that they're allowed to communicate with you on. But you really want to show them that you're really interested and you really want to find out what they have to say, and you want to drink in every little bit of information that you have. So in my experience, I got a K award and moved to Duke. So my challenge was getting a first-time R01. And so there I became BFF with my program person. And I think the poor guy was like mumbling my name in his sleep. He was so sick of me. And we had this nice little discussion at one point where he goes, Vicki, don't you have somebody else to help you? And I was like, oh my God, I don't have anybody. How am I going to tell them this? And so I just was like, there's this long pause and they go, okay, fine, I'll help you. But with that said, the expectation is that I was going to pass the help forward. Okay, so NIH or your sage wise person is going to look at your NIH biosketch. And one of the things that they're going to be looking for is how many publications, what's the quality, and do they, are they senior author publications? How many first author publications? And for an R01, and even these days for a K, you want to have at least one publication that is in the area that you're applying for. For an R01, you want a senior author publication for the area that you're applying for. So, okay, so we've decided, all right, we got a special K and a regular K. We got it. So then the next thing is, I think this is the hardest thing, is getting started. And I was trying to think today, all right, what kind of analogy? And all right, so there were food shows on NPR where you had to go and take the ingredients. They would give you 3 weird ingredients and you'd have to come up with a dinner, okay? And I thought, no, that's not quite it. So the way I sort of think about it is you've got company coming. There's no time to go shopping. So you're going to look at your what's in the refrigerator, what's in the freezer, what you can unfreeze quick enough, what you're good at doing. So you want to really take a 360 vision of what your resources are. Now, when I started and I got my first R1, this really cool program person brought us all in and said, okay, what's your special power? And we're all like, we're smart. We work hard. And he goes, no, you're all smart. You all work hard. So you have to think about what's special about you. And so for me is that I had a passion for serving the community, and I was an MD who saw patients, but also was trained in basic science. So I was a translational person, although that word was not very cool during those times. So my special power was, community-based studying triple negative breast cancer in African American women, because that's what I did that was special. So Minna, you started talking about what was special, that you did, and sort of talk about like taking how you would sort of take stock in what you do.
I think one of the best advice that I've ever received is learn from your patients. And so that's what has always driven my work. I always thought about what are the questions that are bothering me in the clinic? Why is it so difficult that I can't make decisions about who should and shouldn't get chemotherapy when they're older adult? And I was facing all these women who were asking me, Doc, you told me if I get this treatment, I'll be cured of my breast cancer, or I'll have a very little chance of it coming back. But what is that going to leave me with when I'm done? How is it going to affect the quality of my survival? And it was those questions that really drove me to sort of say, well, what do we know about that? And then I started looking and finding, actually, we don't know a lot about that. And the information that we do know does not answer the questions that the patients want to know. How is this going to affect my mind? How is this going to affect my body? Am I going to have to move in with my daughter, or can I live alone? Those are the things that really our older patients were struggling with. And those were the things that really impacted my everyday clinical experience. And so my idea started with my patients. And it was sort of beginning to look and say, okay, how can I use my clinic as a resource to answer the question as a clinical trialist to answer these questions?
So you decided that your secret power was that you had these really cool patients, and you identified the thing that was closest to your heart. So that's I think that's an important step one. Lisa, how about you?
Well, I think I have an unusual background in that I have a PhD in neuroscience. So I've been studying genes, I've been studying protein, I've been studying all kinds of different biology of problems in neuroscience. So diseases that we see as neurosurgeons and neurologists see. But now as a neurosurgeon, I have access to a lot of my patients' tumor samples. And so I can use my background in science to answer questions specific to brain tumors based on the samples I'm able to obtain. And just like Mina, I'm also running a clinical trial using CAR T therapy against metastatic glioblastoma and leptomeningeal disease. Yeah.
So hold that thought. We're gonna get back to that real quick. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now, so I'm gonna go back to Minna. Okay, so Minna, when you decided this was your like cool idea, how did you start assembling resources to? Because for any kind of grant, you have to have preliminary data, you have to have ongoing trials. For a K, you have to have mentors. For an R, you have to have collaborators. How did you start like pulling this all together?
I think I started by finding people with track record of success in terms of what I thought was a track record of success. So people who've had R01s, people who've had funding, people who were established investigators. And I started telling them, telling them I wanted to work with them. And these are the ideas that I had, and these were the interests. And we were trying to find where some of the overlapping interests were. And then I was able to sort of capitalize on the shared interest as a way to begin small projects, to begin to sort of, work backwards. I mean, I thought, okay, if my goal is to improve the lives of patients after they receive their chemotherapy, what do I need to figure out to get to that answer? And that's sort of like, I always have learned to just start backwards as I think about what are the preliminary data that I need.
So, one thing I could see here, and you explained this very eloquently to me, that your mentor, the Dr. R.T. Hurria, who unfortunately died in a tragic car accident, she developed a rating scale for frailty. And then you said, well, okay, so my mentor has this, and then you have.
So then I was like, well, what is the underlying cause of this frailty? How can we go beyond just measuring it in the clinic to understanding what's driving it at the biological level, at the mechanistic level, so that we could develop interventions to actually not just put out the fire, get rid of the frailty, but to prevent it in the first place?
So you thought, what are the cool drugs that I could get access to? So have rating scale, have patients, develop trials, show feasibility, and get drugs that might help some of your patients.
And think outside the box, like think about like the non-traditional thing. What I ended up doing is I went to people who study longevity drugs for other causes and for other purposes. And I thought, oh, well, these drugs may have an important opportunity for my patients in my clinic.
So Lisa, you ended up at City of Hope, which is the be all and end all of CAR T therapy. So you have MD with very bad disease and patients doing very, very badly. You have tissue, and then what's
and
the
then
next
we have
one?
CAR T cells that are developed here at City of Hope, a very specific CAR T cell that's targeting an interesting protein. And I have the privilege of working with a mentor who developed a technique of injecting these CAR T cells directly into the central nervous system, which really puts us in a different bracket of other centers that are using CAR T cells. So having the privilege of working with him and also Dr. Christine Brown, who developed these CAR T cells, I found myself in a great place where not only can I administer these CAR T cells to patients, but I can also collect their CSF and their blood and look at exosomes and different markers of response to therapy over time. So I just happened to be in a great place at the great time with great people. So similar to what Mina said, having the privilege of finding excellent mentors is absolutely critical.
So one thing I want to interject here is it's very important to have mentors, not only with cool ideas and cool resources, but they need to have a track record with NIH. If they're going to be, they have to have R1 or U or some, big time NIH funding. Okay. And that's very, very important if they're going to be your mentor for a K. And they also have to have a track record of mentoring a lot of people. So when you're thinking about looking around and deciding who might be your mentor for a K award, you can go into NIH e-report and you can just Google it and you can look at your prospective mentors NIH track record. And what you want to see is a lot of grants, and you also want to go and talk to people. So what I do when somebody's coming in, I provide them with my mentorship list so they can see that I have a lot of mentees who've gone on to do really great things. But I also offer the opportunity for people to speak to a couple of my mentees who are more senior, who can give a perspective on, well, she's really good about this, but with this issue, man, I had to handhold her and boy, she was a pain. So you want to really do your homework. So you need NIH funding, track record, okay, and also somebody who's going to help you, who's going to be good to you. And I think, with RT and with you also, Lisa, you have Dr. Badi, you have a lot of power. Dr. Badi also has a brain cancer spore, correct?
That's right.
So, centers are also good. So, okay. So you've got a mentor helping you with the preliminary data, sort of providing the floor and, the roof from which you can go forward. You've got your ideas, you're getting your preliminary data. So how do you develop a hypothesis? My hypothesis was I'm going to cure all of breast cancer in my K award. And this was not a good idea. Fortunately, I had very kind reviewers who gave me a little bit of leeway that I think that reviewers won't do today. But how do you start thinking about what's the right size for you to bite off? So Minna, first you, and then Lisa.
It's a tough one. I can tell you that when I started, I wasn't writing very good hypotheses because they were more descriptive and they weren't really taking a stand. For example, I remember one of my very first grant, I wanted to describe the barriers to clinical trials recruitment and in the older adult. Why is it that older adults and my hypothesis is that there were many barriers, but that's not necessarily what a hypothesis is. I have learned over time that you really kind of need to take a stance and there needs to be a direction. It needs to say, I think this will do this in this direction, or this will do this in this direction. And so I think that really being hypothesis driven and hypothesis testing is so critical and observational and are important to laying the foundation, understanding the landscape. But then what I was able to do is say, after I was able to describe the barriers, I was able to say, I think this is the barrier that we can intervene on, and here's how, and here's why.
So you were also mechanistic. So you had a mechanism that you were going to test. Lisa, how about you? You're studying hypoxia.
That's right. And exactly that was my mechanism that I've been interested in a long time. And that has been my background, is using different methods to reverse hypoxia. And so when we started to see challenges of using CAR-T for a brain tumor, I thought about doing some experiments in the lab to identify what happens if we make these environments even more hypoxic. And that was the initial hypothesis I had. I then subsequently realized that hypoxia did indeed seem to make CAR-T less efficacious. So the natural next question would be, well, what happens if we reverse that using a variety of different methods? Would that make CAR-T more efficacious? So exactly right, to have a mechanistic plan in mind, but also based on your background. What do you have to offer? What do you know that might contribute to answering a specific question in a new way?
Yeah, so the analogy that I use is, do girls like pizza? Is a hypothesis because it's a question, okay? But if you were going to have to test that hypothesis, the resources you have to bring to bear are huge, because as we learned in my biology class, there are all kinds of like Y inactivation mutations that people can be, genetically XY, but they are female morphologically, and you have hoivosodose, you have all kinds of stuff. So the question of what is a girl is a very existential question with a lot of preliminary data. And if you're going to test girl, you have to have a lot of different types of girls to make sure you're representative. And pizza, don't even get me started. I love anchovy pizza. But if we were testing anchovy pizza on girls, I could tell you that they probably didn't have a daddy who bought them anchovy pizza when they were 5 years old. They would probably say, blech. So for a K award, you really want to say, do the girls in Erin Rebecca Seewaldt Dietz's fourth grade class, that's my daughter's name. She's not in fourth grade anymore. But anyway, like pepperoni pizza at Pagliacci's. So then you have to go show that you can access the girls. You've got a pizza rating scale, which has been validated and hopefully published, maybe by you, maybe by your mentor, maybe in the literature. You have to show that the girls can eat pizza, that this is possible, that Pagliacci's exists, okay? So you want to think about what are all the feasibility issues that I need to bring to the table. So with me wanting to test, does loss of RAR beta cause breast cancer? Well, it's a problem. There's lots of breast cancers. There are lots of breast cancer subtypes. There are many mechanisms. What I really wanted to say was, does loss, or does RAR beta promote G1S phase arrest through a cyclin D1 dependent pathway? And does loss of this pathway occur in ER negative, triple negative breast cancer? So that's where I really wanted to go. So how about you guys talk about biting off too big a bite and how you kind of rein things in? So what's your process?
I can talk a little bit about my initial submission of the K76 that was not funded. And part of it was that I was trying to do too much. I went in with a grant and I wanted to study, again, I was interested in the mechanisms of underlying physical function and frailty. And I had 3 aims, and 2 aims were like biomarker discovery and validation. The third aim was this intervention with a drug, and I didn't even know what drug I wanted to do. And there was all of this intricate, very large. And the one comment that was all over was ambitious, and it wasn't in a kind, ambitious way. It was like overly ambitious. And I think it was really helpful to sort of step back and say, well, which of these aims do I want? And in fact, when I did my resubmission, I took aim 3, and my whole project was just that one aim. And
one drug.
And one drug. And
biomarkers?
And one focus, and biomarkers. And they were integrated in there, but they weren't their whole other separate, thing. It was all sort of really well done, like nicely together. And so I think, sometimes, when you start, you want to, like you said, you want to cure cancer, but really taking stock of what you can and can't do, and who do you want to focus on is really, and how you want to study it is really, really important.
So you listened to your grant reviews?
Absolutely. Reviewers are always right.
Well, they're always right. And yeah, you just even when they're wrong, you just have to be existential. And I think in that process of being existential, they usually have a point, not always, but usually do. And so listening is really important. Also getting, more senior people to look at it and go, yeah, you need to focus. Yeah, you were kind of like diffuse, which is the other lack of focus.
Right.
So how about you, Lisa? Did you
get... Me too. I mean, if Dr. Badi could tell me focus any more than he... I mean, in other words, that's what he tells me all the time when he reviews my grant applications. I think the important thing to know is it is wonderful to have lots of ideas, and you can still do them all, but you have to do them in order. And so Dr. Rodriguez had given me some great advice. She had suggested, if you're going to write a paper, you're going to want to have 5 figures. Just have that idea in mind. And what experiments would you want to provide the data for those 5 figures to tell a complete story? And so even though you might have a million different ideas, start with those experiments to get your 5 figures, find out what that data is, and then move on from there, which may or may not incorporate some of your other ideas, but at least you're going to be moving in the direction of achieving your goals of whether it be improving CAR-T for GBM or reducing frailty among older women with breast cancer. But at least you're making progress. Because I agree with you, Vicki. I think it's really hard, especially when you're a young investigator. You're so excited. You don't really have that many papers. You're super motivated to get out there and try to make a difference, make a contribution. But it's so dangerous because ultimately you could just be in circles like a Tasmanian devil and achieve nothing. So mentors are critical. Right?
Yes.
Senior people are critical. Run it by them. Your feelings are at the door, right? You leave that away and just say, which of these experiments do you think are most interesting and most important?
And to expect the mentor, the person who loves you is going to say, no, not this, not this. Oh, this looks good. Yeah, this is like, oh, you're all over the place. So the person who loves you is not going to say, oh, beautiful, I'll see you next year. The person who loves you is going to dig deep.
That's right.
And, you might want to go and, if you got somebody like that, send them a, freebie for dinner someplace they like, or if they like fancy wine, send them something nice, tell them thank you. But you want to go looking for that person who's going to rip it apart. You go, okay, I'm afraid to show my face in front of you again. But you go back and that's how you learn. So I think you guys are both incredibly resilient and you've been able to do this and you've been extraordinarily successful. So the one last thing I want to end with is an observation about PhDs versus MDs. I think PhDs love to drill down, and they're trained that way. You want to just go get more and more and more detailed. Whereas MDs, we see associations. We see this is related to this, is related to this, is related to this. So I think MDs naturally don't do this drill down business. So if you're an MD, you want to think really hard about, there are going to be a lot of PhDs on my committee, and I want to think about drilling down. If you're a PhD, you want to think about, I need to think a little bit more broadly and more creatively. So I think having that sort of perspective that this is kind of how I think because this is how I was trained is really important. So, all right, so we're getting ready to close. So each of you guys get to say your closing statement. Nina?
I think one of the things that's really important is being able to do this. Vicky taught us to do this. And if you know what that means, that is a sign for, bringing in all of these people, all of these disciplines, all of these ideas together. The word translational research doesn't just mean doing what you typically think of as translational science. Translational research is what the future is all about. It's being able to take this really cool thing that someone's doing over here and bringing it over here and trying to really put it all together in a new way to answer a really significant and important question. And I think that is really important.
With a focused testable hypothesis.
With a focused testable hypothesis.
That's right.
Very cool. Lisa, you get the last word.
I'd like to add to that. I think it's all about collaboration. And I mean collaboration, both, to apply for a grant or collaboration to develop an idea. So for example, we are so lucky, Vicki, to have meetings with you where you help us review our specific aims. And we happen to have a variety of people on that call with different backgrounds. And it's really interesting to hear all of their perspectives of your specific aim coming from different backgrounds. I think that's really important. When you are thinking of some ideas for your grant, show them around. I would like to think people who are applying work at very multidisciplinary institutions where they do have chemists, they do have biochemists, they have physicians, they have pharmacists, whoever's involved in the idea. Run these ideas by them, get some feedback. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, when I start to think about writing a grant, so I guess I do get the last word, I'm sorry. So when I start thinking about writing a grant, I think about the idea and then I go talk to everybody I can find. And I watch them. And if the idea that I have can't come out in one sentence or it's not clear to the person, then I need to go back and think about it. I also watch people's faces. Do they get excited about it? Because if they're not getting excited, I'm not so sure the reviewers are going to get excited either.
That's right. Right. And ask them for feedback, how to make it more exciting. These are resources you can use to your advantage. Yeah.
I used to run my grants by my daughter.
When she was in 4th grade?
Yeah. And then she got out of the lay audience stage and she went to Georgetown and studied policy at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. That's safe from science to you, Mom. So, anyway, okay. Thank you very much to you guys. I really appreciate it. And you guys are awesome.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you for everything you do for us.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
and for you guys who do for us.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
and for you guys who do for me. I mean, you guys just get me up in the morning. So thank you.